Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 1981 romantic comedy drama film Continental Divide. Now, Continental Divide is one of the last films that John Belushi did before he died. And it's a film that I've honestly been really curious about seeing because it was a film that featured John playing a role that wasn't really the over the top or crass uh comedy guy. It was actually a pretty straight and normal character that he was playing in Suchek, and it had a script by Lawrence Kasdan. It was the first film to be produced by Amblin Entertainment. It was directed by Michael Apted, who is a really accomplished, really solid director. So it's a film that, yeah, I was definitely curious about checking out. And that's why I did pick it up on Blu-ray from Kino Lorber during one of their sales. And after watching the movie, I can say that this isn't what I would consider to be a gem. I don't think this is a great movie, but it's a charming, quaint film. Like, it's a movie that has a good heart to it that definitely goes a long way. And despite the fact that it's kind of muddled in terms of the tone and it's not really that funny and it can be kind of boring at points, there still is a certain charm to it that I really cannot deny the film. Now, before I get around to sharing more of my thoughts on Continental Divide, I want to give a special shout out to Sean for requesting this review. And if there is another film, TV show, or topic that you would like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to either my PayPal or to my Patreon. Link to both is in the video description down below, and I will try to get to your request as soon as I possibly can. Now, Continental Divide is directed by Michael Apted, who is a really talented, skilled director, and this film is no exception. I think he's better when it comes to dramas than comedies. So I think there are some moments when it comes to the comedy where his direction is not as energetic and not as lively and doesn't really match the comic timing of John or other people in the scene very well. But when it comes to the more dramatic moments, when it comes to the more serious scenes, or just gorgeous shots of the location that a good chunk of this film was set in the Rocky Mountains, or at least some place that was a placeholder for the Rocky Mountains. I'm not entirely sure if they actually shot in the Rocky Mountains, but it definitely looked like they did. And when it comes to shots like that, or the nature photography, or the photography of the bald eagles, like, the movie really does have a nice look to it. Even the shots of the city in Chicago also looked quite good. So there's a decent usage of framing, different types of camera pans, zooms, angles, not a significant amount, because it doesn't seem like that's the kind of movie that Apted was trying to direct, or what honestly anybody involved with the film was trying to do with it. Now, I know Steven Spielberg was actually initially signed on to direct this, but he wound up leaving the film to go direct Raiders of the Lost Ark as a favor to George Lucas. Now, he originally was going to do this as a favor to Kasdan, who was a friend of his. We could have honestly seen a world where somebody else directed Raiders and Spielberg directed Continental Divide. And who knows where Spielberg's career would have been after that. It would have been interesting to see what Spielberg would have done with this movie, but I definitely feel that the right choice was made when it comes to him directing Raiders. And Apted was fine. He did a good job for what he was asked to do with this film. Now the script is by Lawrence Kasdan, and I think it does a good job with character development. I think that is one of the script's strongest suits when it comes to the character development of Ernie and Nell and how they initially hate each other but then fall for one another. And the script does a good job providing them with a lot of moments to be at each other's throats early on, but ultimately warm up to each other and believably fall in love. And it creates a really charming, sweet romance that is really the center of the story. But around the romance, there's also this investigative reporter stuff involving Ernie Suchek trying to expose the corruption in Chicago. And he's trying to um, essentially expose Alderman Yablonowitz as the corrupt politician that he is. And so he's writing all these hit pieces in the paper, and uh, things get a little too hot. So that's why he's sent to the Rockies to do a piece on Nell Porter, who is living there alone in the mountains. And something that he was reluctant to do and didn't want to do at all ultimately led to him finding the love of his life. But the investigative reporter stuff, when that does happen and when the script is focusing in on that, it's not really that interesting. It's not really that compelling. It's just stuff that you're just kind of uh okay with. You're just like, okay, all right, this is something that's happening. You're more interested in seeing John Belushi play a more serious role when it comes to these bits where he's investigating the corruption in the city than you are the actual corruption in the city and what is detailed in terms of the script and how it handles this particular aspect of the story. So I definitely feel that Caston could have done a better job in terms of making that aspect of the story more compelling, more interesting than what it was, because it just felt kind of generic, almost like TV movie or your average crime show of the week kind of material. And I do like the ending as well. I really like the fact that Nell, she's decided that she's going to go back to the Rockies. She can't stay in Chicago, in the big city. She's just not comfortable there, even though she really has fallen for and really loves Ernie. And she gets on a train, and Ernie follows her there. And there's this nice little sweet, charming gag where Ernie keeps getting on the train. Uh, where okay, I can stay on the train, but only until the next stop. And then he just keeps going until she winds up at her destination. And they could go their separate ways and not really decide to be together, but instead they decide to make the decision to get married, and they get married in like a convenience store near the train station, and they wind up going their separate ways at the end of the film, but after they're married. So I thought that was honestly rather sweet, charming, and honestly unique because I didn't see that coming. I saw the wedding possibly coming, but I did not see them staying in a long distance relationship. That is not something that you normally see with these kind of stories and these kind of films. So that was honestly a bit refreshing. Um, but there's a lot of stuff with the script that is just kind of either there or not really that great or just kind of out of place. Like, speaking of out of place, there's this whole subplot with this mountain man who is portrayed as a savage. But then you find out that he's a former football player who just decided to become a mountain man. And of course, once Ernie finds out about who this guy is, he starts trying to write a story about him instead of his subject and Nell. But then eventually he changes his mind. But by that point, they've kind of broken up and he's in shambles and he writes a really sappy piece that gets him into a lot of hot water and makes him appear as if he's closer to the end of his career than anything else. And I understand what they were trying to do, with the stuff with Max Birnbaum. I think that's I think that's who it is. The character played by Tony Gainos. But it just was one of those things though where that was just so out of place and weird, especially when it comes, oh, he's a mountain man and he's like hunting for fish in a lake, but he's a former football player. And there's even like a fight where he tried to kill John Belushi's character Suchak with like a knife, and Suchak gets in a fight with him, and then later on it's like, oh, hey, I'm a former football player, or he recognizes him and like, aren't you that guy? I was like, yeah. It's like, oh man, cool. Like it's like I don't know. That was just out of place. The whole nature stuff was fine. It led to a fun scene where Nell gets to essentially uh, kick some hunters' asses. These guys who were trying to hunt these eagles illegally, and she shows up and kicks some ass and smashes their guns. I thought that was a nice a moment for Nell as a character. I like that she's using a lot of nature terminology and stuff that animals do in the wild, and using that for the way that she approaches relationships, which is kind of fun. And I like a lot of the stuff involving Nell and Ernie surviving the elements, whether it's surviving the mountain, in this one scene where the snow gets out of control and Ernie actually slips and falls down the mountain and hurts his back. And then Nell winds up creating this makeshift sled to slide him and her down the mountain. And she busts her butt to get him back to the cabin and get him back to good health. I thought that was nice. And I thought that was a nice turning point for their relationship. And I will give the script credit, like it doesn't really hold back when it comes to poor Ernie just getting the short end of the stick throughout a good chunk of the story. I mean, he hurts his back, and then almost immediately afterwards, he gets attacked by a mountain lion. And I like the bit where, he winds up defeating the mountain lion by hitting it in the balls, which is something that he took from his time with Nell, where he's got to put himself in the shoes of the mountain lion. Think about, what would I do if I was a mountain lion, and what would I go for, or what would I consider to be my most vulnerable point? And it was like, oh, it's my balls, and so he hit the lion in the balls. You don't actually see it, but he mentions that. And I like the little exchange he has with the mountain lion before the lion attacks him. So there are some fun, chuckle worthy bits and pieces in the script, but that's another aspect of the script that's honestly a bit of a letdown. It's not really that funny. There's some moments where it's charming and cheeky, and you might smirk or might chuckle a little bit, but there's nothing that's laugh out loud hilarious in this. And when you have somebody like John Belushi in your cast, that's kind of honestly a bit of a waste of his talents. But at the same time, it was nice to see him branch out and play a role that was against the usual type that he normally played. And I think the script does a good job of giving him a template and a lot to work with in that regard, and it turns out to be genuinely a pretty solid performance. So the script, it's not great, but it's good enough. The cast is more of the same. Like, it's not great, but it's good enough. But it does have some great leads. And I think that's definitely where this cast really shines and really provides some genuinely good work. I mean, John Belushi is Ernie Suchek. Honestly, I think it's one of his best acting roles. He was completely sober when he did this film. He even lost a lot of weight because he tried to shoot some scenes in higher elevation and it was really hard on him because of his weight. So he actually went on a diet and motivated himself and lost weight, and he considered himself to actually be potentially a good leading man after that, and he actually kept the weight off, and he legitimately seemed like he was on a good trajectory for his career. And then he was around a really bad influence when it comes to the cast and crew of Neighbors. And this film's middling success combined with the failure of Neighbors ultimately led to him just completely falling apart and going back to drugs and binging on the drugs and then ultimately dying. And it makes this performance kind of bittersweet when you see it because you see the potential here. You see the kind of role and the kind of actor that John could have grown into if he did not kill himself with drugs. And it is bittersweet because even though the script is kind of generic and played out and been there, done that with the investigative stuff, he still handles it very well. And the scene when he confronts the corrupt alderman at the restaurant is some really good work by him. And it's honestly so good that you almost want to see a movie where he's just investigating some kind of crime the entire time and the love story is on the back burner because he's doing such a good job playing this role of Suchek, this reporter who's relentless and spirited and seems to get along with everybody. At least everybody who's not a focus or a target of his column. And it's a testament to John's inherent charm and personality as well, where he can play a role that isn't really that funny and still turn in a performance that is still really good. So I would honestly say it's one of my favorite performances from him as an actor because it's just so different when it comes to what he did in Animal House and these other films throughout his career, like the Blues Brothers. And I love those performances. I love him as Bluto. I love him as Jake Blues. Like, I love that stuff. But it's really fun to see him play something else and do something that's outside of his comfort zone, and he did a really good job. And it's just a shame he never got to do it again. Even though he played a straight role in Neighbors, but it's really not the same though, because that's still very much a zany comedy. Um, Blair Brown was equally as good, if you ask me, as Nell Porter. And she had some really good chemistry with John Belushi. They were a really good pair. She was funny in her own way. I liked her fire. I liked her spunk. I liked the spark that she had. So I definitely would say it's one of her better performances as an actress as well. Sadly, Blair Brown, she never really got to do like a ton of stuff. She was great in Altered States, followed that up with her role in Continental Divide, and then didn't really get to do a whole lot after that. And it's a damn shame because I felt she was a lot more talented. I felt like she could have had a bigger career, could have done a lot more than she did. She didn't even get casted in a film until 1984 after this movie came out. And she did a good enough job. She was even nominated for a Golden Globe for this, and then it just didn't turn out and turn into anything for her, which really sucks. But I like her in this. I like her performance. She's definitely a good reason why I like the film in at least a time waster fashion. I also don't mind Alan Garfield as Howard McDermott and Carlin Glynn as Sylvia McDermott. Um, but they're not what I would consider to be amazing when it comes to their performance. It's just fine. Same goes for the rest of the cast. It's mainly John Belushi and Blair Brown. They're asked to carry the film, and they do the best that they can. And if the script was a little bit better, then I really feel that they could have carried it farther than they did. But they they still did a good job regardless. Now, the film also features some cinematography by John Bailey, and the shots of the mountains, the shots of the eagles, the shots of the cabin and the woods, even the shots of the city, just very picturesque, and just really looked phenomenal. So I definitely want to give a lot of credit to John Bailey, the cinematographer. The editing by Dennis Verkler, it's not something that's gonna irk me, but it's not incredible. It's not inept though, but it's definitely not something that's like stupendous or grand. It's fine. There are some moments where the editing could have been a bit tighter though, especially when it comes to the scenes that are trying to be a bit more comedic. The music by Michael Small I thought was really bad. This score sounded like it was from a really cheeseball, corny TV movie from the late 70s. It did not sound like a score from a 80s movie. It really did not. And it had a lot of just really bad sounding and instrumental work, and it just sounded corny. I did not like this score at all. It really hurt the film whenever it popped up. It just didn't seem like it fit the movie. He did a much better job with the score for Firstborn, that was also directed by Michael Apted, or Black Widow. Um, but he's not the best composer. He really is not. Like, he did some good work, in the China Syndrome and, Marathon Man. But I wouldn't consider him to be one of the better composers out there, to be perfectly honest, because I mean, you look at this cinematography, Jaws of Revenge, like Mobsters, Wagons East. Like, yeah, he's got some films that he did music for that are considered to be classics, but I wouldn't consider him to be that really, honestly, that much of a big deal as a composer. So maybe a better composer probably would have helped this movie too. Because I think this score is not only something that comes up small in multiple areas, but it's surprisingly too loud and too big in like the worst way. And the pacing of the film is honestly a bit sluggish. There's not a lot that happens for a good chunk of the movie. So I could totally see why some people would find this to be kind of dull and kind of boring. But I was still involved enough in the characters, and I liked the performances by the two leads enough that I wanted to see it through till the end. And I'm glad that I did. Because it is a charming, quaint film that has a good heart to it. And it's not a movie that's really going to stick with you that much. It's not a movie that you're going to think about for days after you see it. It's like you watch it once, probably forget about most of it after you're done, but it's going to leave behind a certain warm and inviting vibe that I think is honestly not as easy to pull off as you might think, because there's a lot of movies where the vibes just aren't right and they can't really get that correct, and it hurts the film. This is a movie that has the right vibe pretty much all the way through, even when it has some moments where the tone is a bit off. And I think that goes a long way when it comes to enjoying it for what it is. I don't think it's a great movie, but I think it's decent. I think it's a decent film. It's at least an average, all right film. And it's a good representation of the kind of roles that John Belushi could have done and was capable of, uh, but we never got to see because of the fact that he just could not control his own demons and they eventually killed him. But anyway, thanks for watching my review of Continental Divide. And until next time, I'll see you later. See ya.